So hello and welcome to the December 2021 edition of No Diagnostic Required, a monthly look at what's happening in the C++ community with me, Phil Nash, and my co-host Anastasia Kazakova. How are you doing this year, Anastasia?
Good. Actually, I'm back from the very long holidays, and that's another excuse we're doing the episode that late. So yeah, I had a great holidays time. Actually, was actually playing with a very nice thing. I don't know if you catch the talk by Michael Chase at CBPCon in 2021, but he was talking about how to teach kids to get into programming, to get into like some STEM products. And he was sharing the information about the very nice microcontroller called Microbit. And I actually got one for my kid, for my son. And I was playing in the microcontroller with him together during the whole holiday. So it's actually based on Nordic Semiconductor. So it's quite a good microcontroller. And it has a very nice, visual environment to code called Make Code, but you can also switch to JavaScript or Python. I also found like the Rust crate for it. Haven't uploaded it. Just decided not to do that right now. Maybe it's too early. But anyway, it's fun. Like you can use the programming blocks, or you can use the programming language, and you can do quite many things with it. So we got a car which is running by the flow, and it can draw things. And so it was like, yeah, it was cool. So actually, thanks to Michael for a very practical talk from CPPCon. Probably one of the most practical from the last conference to me.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I did get a Raspberry Pi for my daughter a few years ago for similar reasons, but we didn't get very far when I found out that I couldn't really solder anymore for some reason. I think I screwed it up. Oh well, yeah. Maybe I'll try the microbit next time.
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay, well, as usual, we have quite a lot to get through, so let's get started. In fact, talking about the new year, we have a new year last year in review on C++ stories. Do you want to tell us about this one?
Yeah, actually, like the last day of 2021, Bartek from C++ Stories posted the final report about the state of C++ and its ecosystem in 2021. He actually does that regularly. So there are several reports from the past years. So, and by the way, if you're not subscribed to his newsletter, it's quite informative and very interesting. So you probably should do that. So among many things mentioned there, it's worth highlighting the final picture of the C++ standard conformance in the major compilers. So like GCC Clang and Microsoft compiler. And it's a very nice observation I got there. So actually 2021 became the year when the work on all three standards in parallel was happening, like C++ 17 was finalized in all three major compilers. C++ 20 is definitely a work in progress. There is still a lot to do, but there are a lot was accomplished during this year. And finally, C++ 23, which is under discussion, it's already in some kind of an active development in the modern compilers. And that's actually great that they're handling three versions in parallel. Now that sounds good. They have some impressive things of C++ 23 actually implemented already. So I was glad to see that. And so from the standards perspective, you can learn from the article about all these major things coming, or at least, highly possible in C++ 23. So yeah, and I found a quote very interesting there. So while many people in the community, they are quite inspired by how the language evolves and how the C++ 23, for example, will look like. But the Nika Eusetis, in his comment to the report, he actually highlighted a problem mentioned by some members in the community already, that he talks about lack of bug fixes in the language and the raw features added without the possibility to fix them because of the backward compatibilities, ABI, and all this stuff. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, not everything is that positive in terms of the comments, but at least that's an interesting observation we should definitely pay attention to. And that's definitely was the year of tooling, and I'm really happy of that because, I'm a tooling person, you know that. The C++ ecosystem got many significant updates, and there are many popular tools like IDEs, compilers, and code analyzers evolving. Like the compilers, for sure, I mentioned already that they got like this work on free major versions. There is also a growing popularity of the Clang family tools, like the Clang Power tools, for example, which landed as a free Visual Studio extension. I think we discussed that in some episode during the year. And also like the 64-bit Visual Studio, also discussed that a couple of times, I guess. And like remote development features developed by many, including JetBrains, and we got a huge release on that in the end of the year. Like Sonosource was also developing a few new things, like the Sonorlink plugin for CLion, hey, and actually many others. And the one thing I didn't know about, I somehow missed that, I don't know how, is the Compiler Explorer new feature that has a great update in 2021 and actually added support for compiling multiple files with CMake. So hey, is it a new IDE? Matt, you already have others. But yeah, it's actually good that you can, take several files mapped with a CMake and work with them in the Compiler Explorer, not with just, one single example you're playing with. So you can build something more complicated, add some library, and like do some interesting stuff there. That's good. So the report also lists some notable C++ books published through the year. It's actually quite many of them. So I guess we talked about the like core guidelines book, but there are like many others. And also it's mentioned in all the events, and we'll probably talk about it later today. So there's like various community surveys held in 2021. And also the author, like Bartek, also presented the result of the survey he, as usual, ran in the end of the year among his audience, like for his blog and newsletter. So there are like a few interesting trends there, which more or less matches the results of the JetBrains developer ecosystem and C++ Foundation Lite survey. So it's not a big surprise, but it's some good results by the end of the year. So like, first of all, yeah, C++ is still popular and loved, which is good. And C++ 17 is like, it grows its popularity. So it's used now by 66% of the respondents. So it's quite a lot. And developers like moved from trying some C++ 17 features to actually using them in the production, which I think is more important, because like if you try on a type project, that's one thing. But if you do something in production, that means you really appreciate the standard and start using it actively. So it's something about 56% or even more for those who are trying C++ 17 to use it in the production. And there are like nearly 13% that are using C++ 20 in the production, which is great because the state of the compilers is still not, fully compatible, at least for the first part of the year. Definitely was the case. Now it's much better, but still, so there are like major features not fully supported still. So, but yeah, actually it's a good number. And yeah, so I was also very happy to see CLion in the top 3 IDs. I'm like excluding the text editors, say in the top 3, which is still popular. But anyway, yeah. So as I said, no big surprises in the results, but it's just good to see that the trends we saw in the previous reports in the beginning of the year, in the Foundation survey and the DEFECA survey, they're still growing in the same direction. So it's kind of good news for us. I don't know, what's the best thing happened to you, Phil, in terms of C++ in 2021?
Well, obviously, from my personal perspective, since I joined Sonosource, it did jump out at me that the Sonosource tools were mentioned there. So that was good to see. But no, it did strike me from reading through that there was quite a lot that happened, considering it was still another largely lockdown year. Maybe because everyone is at home and potentially even not working as much as they have been before. But some of us have been working more than before, so I'm not sure really. Maybe it's just the timing of things. That was a particularly interesting point about the free concurrent standards being worked on in all 3 major compilers. It's not really something I'd thought of before we put it like that. So, yeah, an interesting year in many respects.
Yeah.
Okay. Talking of interesting years, we have some conference news as usual. So C++ now have opened their call for papers last month. I think we may have mentioned it then. That's coming up towards the end of this month. Going to be closing. So if you haven't already submitted a talk and you want to, do that now. Just to remind you, that's going to be an in-person event again. So the last couple of years they've been, the last year they were online. But it is one of those events that you really, really need to be there in person to fully appreciate it. It's a pretty special environment, even if not everyone can get there. It's a little bit remote and quite expensive. But if you do have the opportunity, then do think about that. Anything you want to say about C++ now?
Yeah, actually, that's one of my favorite C++ events for the year. Kind of the most academic in some sense, but the most interesting, and like that's the event where you definitely learn a lot. And probably I learned the most at this event. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join. Still, like there are some issues I can't overcome. But anyway, so that's the great event. So if you have a chance to join, you definitely should. Yeah, and it's great to see that there are like submission is now opened, and so you can try and submit and try and speak there, which is also great. I enjoyed speaking at C++ now a lot. So you have a huge slot, and that feeling when you talk about the thing, and the audience actually knows much better when you're talking about.
Yep.
And they're actually commenting on that. And then there is some dialogue happening in the audience, and you're just, stand there on stage and kind of listening and learning. That's a little bit unusual experience in terms of the conference, when usually a speaker is like much more experienced in his or her topic. Yeah. And like the speakers are usually trying to teach some new things to the audience. But like that's not the case at C++ now quite often. So, and I enjoyed that. So yeah, I was happy to speak there.
Yeah. And if you want to hear a bit more about the history and spirit of C++ now, the episode of CPP Chat that we did just recently with John Kalb, of course, my co-host there, we had Dave Abrahams on, who's now back in the C++ community, and he was the founder of C++ now. Handed it over to John. So that was a really interesting discussion. And not just for that reason, but I'll let you listen to that one to find out more.
Yeah.
Now, talking of founding conferences, the next one is one that I founded, C++ on C. So that's going to be running 4th to 7th of July. Again, we're going to be trying to be in person first. There will be an online component as well. So it's a hybrid, but more focused on the in-person event. Of course, that's assuming that's still going to be possible by then. But we've just opened the call for speakers. So you go to the cpponc.uk page now. The top post is the call for speakers, and that will take you through all the information about that and everything that's involved. So again, that's going to be running until the beginning of February. I think it's the 6th of February, if I remember rightly. So not that much time to get your submission in there. And anything you want to say about C++ on C?
Yeah, and I think you have the keynote speakers already confirmed. So maybe you can share with us.
That is true, yes. We've got Hannah Dusakova, who was meant to have keynoted 2 years ago, just before everything closed down. So she has now agreed to come back. Kevin Henney, who currently holds the record for the highest number of views for a C++ on C talk on YouTube. And Jason Turner, who probably needs no introduction to this audience. So a great lineup of keynote speakers, and I'm sure it's going to be a great lineup of conference speakers as well. But that's up to you. So get your submissions in now.
Yeah, that's a good promotion. So you can join them. Yes, these are the great speakers for the keynotes, and you can be with them. Yeah, that
is a good point, actually. That obviously we want our fair share of experienced top profile speakers, but we also want to hear from new voices, people that are just starting out or have a different perspective, different backgrounds. So don't feel like conference speaking is not for you. If you want to give it a try, put your submission in C++ on C. If you need help doing so, drop me a line. I'll find some way to help.
Yeah. Will you use the same place you used like a couple of years ago? Yeah, for the offsite event?
Yes. Yeah, in Folkestone, Lee's Cliff Hall. It's built into the cliffs. So you do literally look out over the sea on 3 sides, in fact, if you're in the main conference area. So yeah, it is a nice venue. And when we were there in person before, that was February, which in the UK is not the best time of the year to be looking out over the sea. I mean, it's still quite quite interesting. But this time we're going to be in the middle of the summer, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it that time, even though the weather was not that good. But I guess it was some kind of a classical UK weather, at least what you usually learn from the books.
Authentic, I think we call it.
Oh, yeah, in that sense. But I kind of enjoyed that. So we had a kind of couple of days off there with my husband, and we were walking around. And so it was good. So the place is fine, and it's really interesting. And you can go to some close, small like villages or like places of interest and find some interesting thing around. So you probably should think about some kind of a field trip, similar to what CPPCon usually does there in Folkestone. It might work. I mean, the place is great.
We'll definitely think about it.
Yeah, but again, unfortunately, I won't be able to join you, so which is sad because I really would like to. So, but hopefully, in a couple of years.
Yeah, appreciate that. By then, it's still not going to be possible for everyone to make it. But I think at least the UK and most of Europe should have that opportunity.
Yeah, but that means the competition for the talk submission is like less.
You would think. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Again, it's your chance to prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Now, talking of new conferences, I mean, that's 3 years old now, but brand new conference is C++ North, which is going to be in Toronto in Canada. But we did mention this briefly last month. Just after C++ on C, actually, I think there's only one clear week between them. So July 17th to 20th. And their call for speakers will open on, I believe it's the 24th of January.
Yeah.
So just a couple of weeks. So, but yes, exactly 2 weeks, isn't it? So if you think you can get to that, then there's your chance to submit a talk there as well. And they are going to be running their call for speakers system on the same system that C++ on C uses. So if you submit to both, it will look quite familiar.
Yeah, and it's actually a fully offsite event with Sean Parent and Kate Gregory confirmed as their first speakers. So yeah, that's also a good company.
Oh yeah. Kate was I think the opening keynote for the first C++ on C, in fact. So
yeah,
she's moving into these opening keynote for new conferences scene, I think, cornering that market.
Yeah. Was that the talk about the naming?
Yes,
from her?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah. Okay, and C++ Russia, I'm sure that's something you can tell us about.
Yeah, I can comment on that since, I'm a member of the program committee. So actually, in Russia, the situation is still unstable. So we decided not to take the risk. So we're still doing the online event. But the good point is that you can join us from any place in the world. So you can submit and join us online. So, and we usually try to schedule the conference in the way that we have sessions in the morning, and the other days we have them in the evening by Moscow time, which means the people from the United States, for example, can find some comfortable slots. So, and we usually have international speakers, and especially those from US grouped at these days in the evenings. So when they have early mornings. So yeah. Anyway, so we have the tracks in Russian and English, so that's kind of an international event with a good lineup. We quite often have lots of international speakers. We had a great talk by Titus last time we did the conference. Actually, you should note that we moved the event to June this time, so it was in November, and now it will be in June. And from the perspective of the time frame, so we decided to schedule it right now once per year. Previously, we had 2 events per year when we especially were having the offsite events. But right now, we'll have just one event for the next year, and it will be in the beginning of June. So hopefully, we're not conflicting with any other conferences. We checked I saw CPP schedule for many, many times before setting the date. So anyway, the call for paper is open and running, and it will be open till March 21st. So you still have lots of time to submit. So everyone is very welcome to submit. We many, many topics, and there is usually good variety and good diversity of the topics we do accept. So yeah, I'm just encourage everyone to submit. And so if you're not fully tired of the online events or would like to try some new online event, that's probably something you can try. So yeah, that's about
And all
the
those
C++
talks will be
Russian.
in Russian. Yeah.
There will be talks in Russian. There will be talks in English, but like, yeah, you can practice both. Usually we have like in parallel, we have one track in English and a couple of tracks in Russian. So in every time slot, you can find a talk in English and you can find a couple of talks in Russian. So that's how we try to accomplish that. So yeah.
So you say you've reduced it from the 2 a year down to the 1. So is this the
Yeah,
Moscow one or the St. Petersburg one?
That's actually the most interesting question because, yeah, Phil touched that. So previously we had 2 events per year, and that's how the organizers, the Jack crew who are like hosting the event, are usually organizing their conferences. So they have 2 events per year for each technological conference they do. One is called like the Moscow event, and the other one is the St. Petersburg event. These are the 2 biggest cities in Russia where we usually hold the event so that the communities could join in each cities. So, but like with the online, it doesn't make any sense. So we were keeping that naming for a while, saying like, okay, online C++ Russia St. Petersburg or online C++ Russia Moscow, but that doesn't make any sense. We're even in the same time zone. So we decided just to get rid of the name, at least for now while we're online, and run it once per year so that we have more time for preparing the beta schedule, the beta program. And so we can actually like train the speakers. We actually do a lot of trainings for the speakers, trying to help those who are new to the presentation skills, who are new to speaking to the public, so that they can learn something. And we do a lot of training sessions in a row with every speaker if they wish to. So if they need that, and we try to work with the submissions, starting working with the potential speakers before we even accept them. So you might get some very valuable feedback even if you're not accepted. So you might run for several sessions if you wish to with us, with the program committee, I mean, and you might get some good feedback, which the next year, for example, you might, handle and submit a talk which is actually accepted. So we had such cases in the past. So yeah, that's why we decided that once per year is maybe more suitable, so that the program committee actually has their regular jobs. So we need some time to handle all the activities around the conference. Yeah, and we also run the podcast with the program committee, which is called Pure Virtual Cast. It's in Russian, but it's just a place where we just chat with the program committee and some guests sometime.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're running it a bit long already, and we haven't finished all the conferences yet. So just very quickly, going to mention the ACCU conference because I think we did cover it last time. But the schedule, I believe, is set, but will be announced. Is it next week?
Yeah, somewhere next, I guess, week. So in the coming weeks. So it's already prepared. And like as a PC member, I can say that it's great, but it's not yet published. So yeah, they're just the keynotes. Speakers announced like the guide outs and Hannah, the Patricia, us, and Titus. So yeah, but the full schedule will be quite soon, I guess. So and the conference is running hybrid in the beginning of April. So you can join the offsite event or you can try and join online.
Yeah. Right. It's always one of my favorite conferences as well. And it helps that it's pretty close to me.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Well, one more item to get through before we get to the standards news. So you pick this one out. There's 2 articles, actually. There's the evolution of lambdas, and then there's the evolution of functions in modern C++. So maybe you want to take those 2 together.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, 2 blog posts of this kind in December. I don't think they agreed, the authors with each other to post it. Like the one is from Jonathan Baccara and the other one is like from Marius Bansila. So, but actually these are quite good, maybe sometimes quite basic blog posts. But if you would like to summarize your knowledge about lambdas and functions in C++ and what they are actually capable of, and what are the references to maybe some other papers or documents, you might find that interesting. So I'm, like, as always, a fan of Jonathan Becker's overview posts, which are kind of, sorting out some basic knowledge in my head on a specific topic. So that what happened with this Lambda blog post. So it's summarizing the state of lambdas in C++ 14, 17, and 20. And it just marks some important milestones. Like, for example, it starts with the lambdas in C++ 14, where the C++ lambdas became very similar to regular functions, and thus quite convenient for everyday use, because there was added like the default and template parameters. They added the ability to use generalized capture and made it possible to return a lambda from a function. So it just started looking like a function actually, but not something artificial. With C++ 17, there were two important milestones which are mentioned in the blog post. First is that the lambdas became available in the context evaluated at compile time. It's still like maybe not that practical till C++ 20 when you get many ASTEL algorithms in const expert mode, but still that you can use lambdas with const expert in C++ 17. And the next big enhancement from C++ 17 in lambdas is an ability to capture a copy of a pointer to this. So like, it seems small from the very first look, but if you think deeper about it, it actually helps you avoid the undefined behavior and like the unwanted crashes. And there is an example demonstrating that in the Jonathan's blog post. And finally, C++ 20, which also moves lambdas in the directions of the regular functions. So it improves how the lambdas look like, and added some classical syntax to define templates and capture a variadic pack of parameters, so that you get the similar instruments you get for the C++ functions you get for lambdas as well. And the evolution of functions, actually, that's maybe a little bit more basic, so it's not getting into the details. It also actually mentions lambdas, like things like coroutines, but it's definitely not getting into details on this. So it's mostly listing the things which happened with C++ functions from pre-C++ 11, actually, to the modern C++ 20. So you can also learn what was added with each standard and see how the functions evolved with things changed around the functions. So, and yeah, I think that's all what I was going to say about it. So I don't know, Phil, if you checked the blog post or have some opinion about that.
So I didn't really read these ones in depth, I will admit. But they did remind me of a talk by Rainer Grimm. That's actually very good. The same sort of approach, really, just following the evolution of functions through lambdas and onto coroutines. So that was more weighted towards coroutines, if I remember rightly. Goes into more depth there. So a bit of a compliment to these ones. But I always love these language evolution posts, because sometimes you can forget all the stages through the history that the things went through, even things that we take for granted. It's just nice to review those, and sometimes you think, oh yeah, I missed that, or I forgot about that.
Yeah, I just want to print them, and to put them on the wall in my workplace, just to check the things out. When was this thing added? Yeah.
And I didn't catch whether either of the articles mentioned the possibility of abbreviated lambda syntax that we're looking at the moment.
I don't think it was mentioned there.
That'll be the next stage of evolution.
Yeah, probably. Probably there will be a follow-up. But, we can imagine here what would be the next steps for lambdas in 2023, 26, and further.
Yeah, I think abbreviated lambdas might be that big step. We talked about them in the context of contract syntax a couple of months ago, if I remember rightly. Yeah. So I'll try and put a link back to that, which is actually a good lead into the next section, our standards news roundup. So another busy month. I've had to just pull out a few highlights, including some things we looked at before that are continuing. So the portable assumptions paper from Timur, your new colleague back at JetBrains.
Yeah, I've heard about him.
Yeah. So we did look at this, I think it was either last time or the time before, so I'm not going to go into it in too much depth. This is a new revision, R5, and it's pretty minimal changes, really. Most of it is just some extra clarifying material that's been added up front just in response to some of the discussion that they've had. And from what I gather, it's already mentioned in the paper, but the only real outstanding concern is about some potential implementation difficulties with one particular compiler. I won't mention the name because I'm not sure we should talk about specifics at this point. But that's really the only thing. Nobody else seems to be raising any other issues. So it's set to go to the polls, which I think open tomorrow and will run until the next plenary, which is going to be 7th of February. And all indications are it's got a pretty good chance of getting voted into C++ 23. So that's going to be a win. That'll be the one part of the original contracts that may actually make it into C++ 23. But that said, there is actually another paper that's just been released, P2507, only assume conditional expressions. So this is really just picking at one particular issue in the portable assumptions paper, which is to do with the type of the expression that, or the category, if you like, of the expression that an assumption actually takes. When you say this is something that we assume to be true, you specify that as an expression. But in C++, there's different categories of expression, and they're actually arranged in a hierarchy. So the very, very top level allows top-level comma operators, which are almost always a bad idea. So that's ruled out. The next level down is assignment expressions. And that's what the portable assumptions paper uses. And you might think that's a bit odd. Why would you want to have an assignment in an assumption? It doesn't make sense. But actually, it's because of this hierarchical way that expressions are specified. It's sort of like the most liberal way of expressing or specifying an expression. You can say, well, pretty much any expression you can write is valid here. So, it covers all bases, really. But the other way of looking at it is saying, well, let's have a look at the actual use cases that we have. What's the minimum type of expression that will satisfy that? And this paper argues that that's a what's called a conditional expression. So it's a bit more restricted, doesn't include things like yield expressions and so on that we don't really have a use case for. So that actually sounds pretty reasonable. So why wouldn't we just immediately do that? And maybe we will. The counter argument is twofold. One is the more liberal type of expression, the assignment expression, means that if there are use cases that we haven't thought of now that are actually useful, we're already covered. So we don't have to change anything. But perhaps the more compelling part is that all of the existing platform-dependent or platform-specific extensions that give you assumptions today, they all use assignment expressions. So really, that would be the safest way of standardizing existing practice, just to adopt that same category of expression. So there's actually good arguments both ways. But in the end, it's actually a reasonably minor point that both sides are willing to concede if it means we actually get this feature in the standard. So this is not going to block portable assumptions going in. That's still going to be voted on, even with this in flight. And we can still fix it later if we meet that design freeze deadline of February. So it's good that this is being discussed just to make sure that we don't, corner ourselves once again. But we can fix this up later, even as late as a national body comment after the formal standard has been approved. So yeah, it's not going to hold up portable assumptions, but just an interesting aside there, I think. Any thoughts on assumptions or conditional expressions?
Maybe more like a question, because I see the option for the throw expression there, and I'm wondering how that's going to work in this case. Don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you have to think, if you're going to allow assignment expressions, you have to think, well, what happens if you have a throw expression or a yield expression? I think one of the things raised was with the yield expression is if you have a yield within an assumption, and that's the only place in the function that it occurs, does that make it a coroutine when it wouldn't have been otherwise?
No.
So, but then it turns out that you can have an await in there, even if it's a conditional expression. So that's actually not unique to to yield expressions. So yeah, lots of little details like that. That's the stage we're at, just arguing over those at the moment. And there are solutions to all of these. It's just a case of thinking them through. For example, we can just say, and this is probably what we will do, we can say, any of the coroutine keywords are not allowed in an assumption expression. So it's a condition expression minus coroutine tokens, that sort of thing. We just got to think through all of those.
Yeah, okay, because when you're saying like that nearly everything is possible, it looks a little bit complicated and scary.
Yeah, we can limit it in a more ad hoc way. Obviously, it's just cleaner if we say, it's a conditional expression, and that's it. And that covers most of the bases. So I'm pretty much in favour of doing that. But we'll see how that plays out, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on because we are running short on time. Another one we looked at before, stood execution. So if you remember, this was the spiritual successor to executors, which had been going round and round for many years, and every time it seemed to get close to being ready to be standardized, it's like it all got thrown up in the air again. And stood execution came along early last year, I think it was, and said, well, actually, maybe we're just thinking about this the wrong way. This is a slightly different model that everyone seems to be on board with. There are some limitations, but overall, when I say limitations, I mean it doesn't make everyone happy, not necessarily technical limitations, but overall it seems to be gathering consensus. But being such a big thing and being having so much history behind it, it's never going to be easy to get this in. So I don't think at this point it's going to be something that's going to be ready for 23. Well, certainly not at this point. But I think even a while ago that was going to be true. It's still such a big paper. I've not read all the way through, so I'm not going to comment too much on the content beyond what I said before on this. What I will say is that the revision notes for this one, they're actually quite long just on their own. There's quite a few things that have changed in this revision alone. We're on R3 here. Does suggest this is still a proposal that's maturing, but a little way to go yet, I think. It's definitely being actively discussed, and that's the important thing. Hopefully, it's not going to drag on the same way that executors did. We will see an end to it at some point. And on that note, there is another new paper which goes alongside it. It doesn't propose anything new. It's more sort of background explanation, sketching in the context, and what you need to know to understand what the stood execution paper is really about. But it also makes a few points. It's the title, Computations as a Global Solution to Concurrency. So it introduces this term computations, explains what that is, and talks about it being a global solution, meaning it covers all the cases that we know of. It's not like, well, it covers these cases, which is what most people need anyway. No, it actually covers all of them. So that's quite a bold statement. And I just want to read a couple of extracts from it because they really, I think, give you a lot more of a feel for what this is about. The motivation section near the beginning. It says, adding a concurrency model in the C++ standard is not something to be taken lightly. It's not an incremental change, it's a major shift in direction, which hopefully changes the way C++ developers write concurrent code. And then it goes on to list all of the things that we need to get right for that to happen. So basically saying, we've got to take this seriously. Okay. The rest of the paper seems to be about that context and background reading, as we said. But then towards the end, it comes to this general takeaways section. And this is really worth reading. It says, we've shown in this paper that computations can be used as a general mechanism for solving all concurrency problems. We've also shown that computations can be used as a top-down mechanism to describe concurrency. Thus, it provides a way for doing structured concurrency. All these can be made without compromising safety and ensuring the maximum efficiency under certain assumptions and ignoring the time spent in scheduling. Using computations and possibly some higher-level abstractions, the programmer will no longer need to add locks into the code. This has the potential of freeing the C++ world from a lot of pain induced by ad hoc concurrency. That may be a bold statement, but after these results, we might dare to say that computations solve concurrency. So I think some quite strong words there and quite powerful thoughts there. I say I'm not expert enough to say whether that's actually the case, but I'm really interested to see how that plays out. Do you have any thoughts on the whole stood execution and this computations paper?
Yeah, I just hope that with that many discussions going for years, I guess, on the topic, when we finally get something or when we're ready to get something, we have, I hope actually for a good bunch of talks, especially if we take the first paper when there are so many great speakers there listed, so that maybe they can do, a set of talks about how the things are going to work for us. Because when you have these discussions for years, you never know in the end what's actually going to be there in the standard, because you've heard like all these, options, all these opportunities you've read for that many papers, and then like, okay, what's there in the end? So you just need to know what you're gonna use. So yeah, I do hope that they will do a bunch of presentations on that and like teach us how to use what's actually accepted when it's accepted, or like right before it's done. So yeah, because otherwise, I have a bunch of all these things in my head. I'm not sure what's going on there in the end.
Yeah, there'll definitely be some teaching opportunities, I think. That does say it's going to be a big shift in thinking, so yeah.
Yeah.
Just hope we get there. So from asynchrony to synchrony, we have synchronous coroutine generators for ranges. Now, if this sounds familiar, we looked at a different proposal with the same name just, I think, last January, so just a year ago. And it turns out, there is another paper, synchronous coroutine generator for ranges, different paper number. So the one we looked at last year was by Lewis Baker, the author of CPP Coro and Coroutine Jabot. But this new one by Casey Carter, you can think of it as like a fork of the one we looked at before. Because, we looked at R1, and I think we got up to about R3 in April, and then nothing since then. Now, I don't know why. I don't know whether that was going to be picked up, but certainly not in time for C++ 23. So, whatever the reason, Casey's picked that up, and he's basically, you can think of this as the spiritual successor again to the paper we looked at last year. More like an R4 or an R5, depending on how you want to look at it. Now, I did actually do a diff of the papers to see how much had changed. And there's actually quite a lot that is in common. Mostly tweaks to the examples and some new material added. So what this is, as it says, it's a stood generator. So for coroutines, one of the most important use cases is a generator for continuously yielding new values. Also, arguably the simplest type of coroutine, at least the simplest conceptually. But if you look at this paper, it's 28 pages long. There's a lot of subtleties there. It's not something you want to have to write yourself if you can avoid it. So, if you do need to have something in the meantime, Lewis Baker's CPP Coro does have a generator library in it. But hopefully we're going to get this. I don't know if it's in time for C++ 23 at this point, given that it is a continuation of a paper that was already making progress, but we'll see. But it does strike me that there's so much to specify what turns out to be quite a simple type of coroutine. Any thoughts on that one?
But why is it a like separate paper. I mean, like if that's kind of follow up with that many things in common, why it's not just the revision of the previous one, or just because the author changed or they disagree on something that new paper is proposing. So what's going on?
I don't know any of the background to this. I can only go by the acknowledgements section on the first page here. I'd like to thank Lewis Baker and Coroutine Jabot, whose P2168 I looted shamelessly for this proposal. So, and then it says, this paper is presented as a new revision of their unpublished D2168R4 for continuity of design. So it sounds like there was an R4 in the works, got put on the shelf, and presumably because it's an entirely different person, he decided to start again, but just take what he needed from it. But I don't know more than that. Just be speculation.
Okay, because from what you are saying, it looks like that's indeed the continuation, like more like a next revision to what we had previously. So with just some new ideas. But okay, let's see how it goes.
Yes. It would be interesting if if P2168 does come back and they have to compete against each other.
That would be a conflict.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a merge.
Yes, exactly.
Do we have good tools, for making diffs for the papers and also to do some merge automatically on the papers? I mean, like...
I'm just an aside, but don't know if you noticed, but there's about 3 or 4 different styles of, physical layout styles for these proposals. Most of them, I believe, are written in some markup language that tends to be stored in Git. So there is the ability to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if all of them are.
Okay.
Okay, so rounding out the standards news, here's the first version of a paper we've been talking about for a long time, which is an interesting thing to say. But yeah, finally, monadic functions for stood expected. This is something we have literally expected for a while. The reason being that the monadic functions for stood optional have been in the works for some time. And when they were originally proposed by Cy Brand, they did say that these functions would apply equally to stood expected, but because we don't have stood expected yet, they're not proposed. So now stood expected is just in the final wording stages of being put into C++ 23. Seems to be the right time to propose the same functions be added to stood expected as well. So what are they? We've talked about them before, so I'll be brief, but just the ability to sequence functions that return stood expected so that all of the actual error handling is sort of shuffled off to the end, a bit like you would do with exceptions. But it's done by passing lambdas or functions instead of writing the code in line. But that's basically what it achieves. So I've talked about this in a couple of my talks on error handling, and certainly in Dawn of a New Era, I joked that these functions that we do expect to get at some point, they are a proposal that hasn't been written yet on top of a proposal that hasn't been accepted yet. But we're now starting to get to the point that it's all coming together. So that's as much as I'll say on that. But any thoughts on the monadic functions?
Yeah, it looks just it's closing the holes we have, so that's quite logical, to propose that.
Yeah. I don't expect any pushback on this, so it may actually be in time for C++ 23. It is targeting it.
Great.
Okay, so that's our standards news for this month. Let's have a quick look at the tools. There's not so much this month, so hopefully we'll make up some of that time. Do you want to tell us about embedded software development in Visual Studio?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So this is a new blog post from Visual Studio team. So it describes the updated workflow for embedded development. And they're using the Azure RTOS example, which is one of the popular embedded OSes. So you probably have heard of these RTOSes like often used in the embedded domain, like FreeRTOS or Zephyr. And there's also this Azure TOS example they're using, like kind of obvious they're using the Azure TOS. I'm like expecting that from Microsoft. Anyway, so that's the thing that caught my eye was the very interesting approach, how they quickly installed all the necessary tools because they have the VC package manifest file loaded along with the project folder, and then like the whole magic just happens because the VC package just installs everything they need because they have the proper manifest file in the folder, which looks great. I mean, like you never can imagine this in the world of embedded in C++. So that's truly magical. Also, you can learn a few tips on like the editing process in Visual Studio, like how you build, deploy, debug, and like do all the editing stuff with this code. And the two features which caught my eye, mostly because we have very similar features in CLion. So, and I was just like exploring how they do the things. So one is the register view. So if you have an SVD file from the controller manufacturer, you can use this for peripheral registers description to get the peripheral view right in Visual Studio. So, and the other one is the RTOS object views, which you get also for RTOSes, and they are also now added to Visual Studio, so you can get some interesting information. Because like RTOSes is, when you debug it, it's not just single C++ application. You have these tasks there, and you have some extra information you would like to extract during the debug. So not just, watching some specific variables, but you would like to watch these tasks, and you would like to watch some like objects and some specific information. And there are like parameters which you can put to the config file to control them. So it's good when your IDE can visualize that. So we are actually working in the same direction in CLion, trying also to provide these views for your task, Zephyr in our case. So, and that's an interesting thing you can add and enhance the embedded debug process for tasks. So yeah, that's what the blog post is about. Is actually going through this sample application and shows all these nice features available now in Visual Studio. So if you're doing some more tasks, you can play with them. So that's all I actually have to say about that. I don't know if you have any first film or you played maybe with some.
Not much. I have fairly limited experience, real world experience in embedded development. But one thing I do know is that we talk about embedded development as if it's this one thing, but actually it's many, many, many things. They're all very different. So
that's true.
It's a real challenge to cover the
and actually in the world of RTOSes, there are so many of them, because when we started thinking about that, I was mostly thinking about the FreeRTOS. Then I found out there is Zephyr. Then I found out there is this Azure TOS. So there are so many of them.
Now, you mentioned the CLion a few times back there. What are the plans for CLion for 2022?
Yeah, we got some special announcement for the roadmap from our CLion team. So if you missed that, you can check the blog post. So we actually decided to fully dedicate the CLion 2022.1 iteration to bug fixes and making a quality release. That's something we do with IntelliJ IDEA for a while, and we decided like to fully focus on that CLion. So we are truly not doing any like new features. We're trying to fix the current workflows. Sometimes it involves adding some new stuff, but most of the time it's just fixing the stuff. So we announced this kind of a roadmap, if you can call it that way. So it mostly describes the main directions in which we're going to implement the improvements. So we have some long list of things to fix, which we prioritized based on the like UTrack votes, based on feedback, based on how hard the case is, how popular it is, how often it annoys our users, and other things. So the major directions is definitely the new remote development workflow, because it was introduced in the recent 2021.3 release, and it's very, very fresh, and it has lots of probably like issues and inconsistencies there. We still need to address lots of cases there. And we started getting lots of good and valuable feedback pieces on that. So I think now we have the actual background to fix the things, because we know how the people are using it, and we know what they're trying to use and what actually doesn't work. And also there will be a bunch of fixes for the toolchain in general in CLion. Then there is this embedded development topic. So we plan to finalize actually the serial monitor plugin, which we're working for quite several releases, and we would like just to finally put something to the released version. And we'll keep working on improving these RTOS views. So the thing I was mentioning while talking about Visual Studio, so we also have these views and we keep improving them. And actually there's a huge story because, as I said, there are these config files with many parameters. And when you're tuning them, you can actually you tune them in order to get more interesting views about your RTOS in the end during the debug. And so we're working on providing this information during debugging and tuning it and making it work in a proper way. So there are lots of fixes we would like to produce there. And yeah, as also addressing several top known issues in project models, in debugger performance, working definitely on Clang destability because we are constantly merging the new LVM version, and that means that we, from one hand, we're introducing new things from Clang, but from the other hand, we're introducing new crashes from Clang, which we need to address and fix. And yeah, the overall IDE performance is still the huge topic, and there will be a few directions for it in this quality release. So yeah, if you have any annoying issues which really bothers you, that's a good time to to bring the attention back. So just ping us in Twitter, blog, whatever, so you can find the channel how to reach out to us. So yeah, we'll try to put it to the plan. And who knows, maybe we'll address it this quality release iteration.
I'm sure you'll be hearing from Tano.
Yeah. So we actually have a list of quite users who are dedicated to submitting lots of feedback, and that's actually good. I like that when we have the users who are actually reminding us about the pain points they find in the product, because even though we kind of remember about them, it's still good to to make a point and to add one more vote in our heads so that we were also annoyed and deciding to fix it.
Yeah, I know you do this from time to time, the bug fixed focused release. I would like to call them the Snow CLion releases after the famous Snow Leopard Macross release.
Yeah, but we'll see how it goes. So we never actually did it in that intensive way. So we had releases which were mostly focused about the fixing issues and some quality stuff, but at the same time we always had a few directions for the new things added to the product. So there also always were some ongoing works on some major stuff, but this time we actually decided to put it on hold fully. So we'll try to focus on these fixes, and we'll see how it goes.
Great, good luck.
Thanks.
And with that, I think we are in danger of coming in on time. So just time to do a very quick and finally, which is, again, about us. And just to give you a little teaser to expect a few changes next time. And I'm not going to say any more than that, just that we're going to change the format up a bit.
Yeah.
Just keep you guessing. So, yeah.
Should be fun.
That's going to be the end of the show. I think we have about 30 seconds if we want to come in under the hour. So I will say, if there's anything you want us to cover in the future, do let us know. Otherwise, we shall see you next time.
Yeah, see you.